So many of the things that are on the front end of my presentation have been covered so well in the last day and a half that I'm just going to buzz right through them. The first piece is I'm just absolutely convinced that we have to have flexibility as it relates to leadership development. So that's the premise here. The theory of change we have at the Nebraska Community Foundation is the only people that can build a community are the people that live and work there, and the rest of us can help. But that's all we can do is help. And in Nebraska, we have all this abundance, and we really need to think about it in those sorts of terms. One of the ways of doing that is through this massive transfer of wealth that we have going from one generation to the next. We think it's some $600 billion here in Nebraska in the next 50 years. And one of the frames we have to do then is to say, okay, if there's this huge amount of abundance, why on earth have we continued to hemorrhage kids over time? So one of the frames we've put to it is, how do you help create magnetic communities, communities that are drawing people toward them? So we've put together these pieces, and I agree that this is not formulaic work. However, there are pieces that build upon one another here: vision, distributed leadership, discretionary capital, and ultimately citizen engagement, people that are giving their time, talent, and treasure to the future of their place. For this goal, we have to be in the people attraction business. In Nebraska, we have thousands of jobs that are going wanting for a lack of people. And we really need to continue to think about this. Economic development just isn't about job creation. It's really about building communities where people say, I want to live and work, this is where I want to raise my kids. So you connect that to leadership development. And personally, I'm convinced that leaders aren't born, they're made. And we become better leaders by practicing. And there's lots of things we need to practice doing. Here's some of those. But ultimately, the thing we need to do is have the opportunity to make choices that matter, learn from those choices, and then do better the next time. This is a little compare and contrast chart, and this could really get me off into the weeds. So this isn't a values proposition at all. It just means that today things are very different than they were 50 years ago. When my dad was on the local board of education in my little hometown of Red Cloud in the 1960s, those board members had an enormous amount of discretion. They also did it with all their own resources. So in 2015, you have a fair amount of state and federal aid for all these different services, but now we have standards and mandates and a whole different set of rules. The point being, it's a different experience today to be a locally elected official than it was 50 years ago. So one of the tools that we've tried to bring to the fore in helping people to have that opportunity to practice is a community-focused unrestricted endowment. Very simply, an endowment is a permanent pot of money where you're just spending an annual payout, creates a perpetual income stream. And how do you use that as a real margin of excellence? How would you use the $45,000 created annually off $1 million endowment to really focus on the future, focus on development, not relief? Use it as a margin of excellence, create a space for people to dream about the future, and obviously help people make the case themselves to their friends and neighbors about investing in the future of their place. Through the Nebraska Community Foundation, we're doing this in lots of places in lots of ways. We now work in about 250 communities around the state. That's one estimate, that's one illustration of the growth we've seen through the Nebraska Community Foundation over the last 10 years. It's grown a lot. And the question really comes down to this, thank you. If we're trying to do people attraction, how are we doing that? We can do it through workforce development, we can enhance curriculum, we can do all sorts of things with early childhood education or business development. The question becomes, what are the choices we want to spend our money on to try to attract people? The other thing about this is, what are the skills, what are the behaviors that we really want leaders to have and engender to create that space where people say, that's the community that I want to be a part of. So as you can see, this list of skills and behaviors associated with leadership development are very much in a power with as opposed to power over frame, where if we're doing this in partnership, we're doing this within the context of trust and relationship, we can really help one another get to where we want to go. The one I want to lift up off this list is the final bullet, which is, I think, the other thing all of us have to do as leaders, is really challenge those assumptions about locally available capacity. So to sum this up, we're really optimistic that unrestricted endowments are another tool in the community development toolkit that can help us build not only flexible money, but an opportunity to really practice leadership, and practice leadership in, ways that are really participatory, distributed, and ultimately create the hometowns that we want to be a part of. Thanks.